Welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. If you're tired of censorship, outraged by government abuses, and thirsty for real insights, then you're in the right place. Get ready, because here, the fight for freedom never ends. Here's your host, Professor Nick Giordano.
Welcome, everyone, to the America's Founding series on the P.A.S. Report podcast. This is your host, Nick Giordano. I am glad you could join me today. Make sure that you follow and subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Also, visit the P.A.S. Report website, pasreport.com, and share this episode with your family and friends. I got a great one lined up for you because what if I told you one of the most important founding fathers that you never heard of signed every single founding document that birthed the United States of America? And what if I told you that without him, without his steady hand, his quiet wisdom, the Constitution itself might not exist? So today, I want to tell the story of Roger Sherman, the only founder to sign all four key founding documents from the Continental Association, the Declaration of Independence, the Articles of Confederation, and the United States Constitution. He wasn't a fiery orator. He didn't crave the spotlight. Instead, Sherman was a humble but decisive man and a master of logic, an unwavering believer in the idea of self-governance. And he helped stitch together a nation from all different parts. Now, I want you to get ready to discover the quiet architect of America's freedom, because this man does not get the credit that he deserves. Our story begins not in the grand hall of power, not born in a family of privilege and wealth, but in a modest home in Newton, Massachusetts, where Roger Sherman, born 1721, his family wasn't wealthy, no formal education. Education was a luxury that they couldn't pay for. Young Roger began his working life as a shoemaker. Think about that. He inherited this trade from his father. Imagine being hunched over leather, stitching soles, his hands busy. But with Roger Sherman, his mind was constantly at work. And what truly set Sherman apart from other people was his insatiable appetite for knowledge. With no university to attend, he became a voracious reader, devouring books on law, mathematics, history, theology during any spare moment he had. And he was self-taught. And that's going to allow him, that's going to propel him, take him away from this shoemaker's bench. Because in his early 20s, he decides to leave Massachusetts and he's going to move to New Milford, Connecticut, where he's going to quickly establish himself. His keen intellect combined with a deep understanding of legal principles that he acquired entirely on his own. It earned him respect. He passed the bar, he became a successful lawyer, then he became a successful judge. Eventually, he would become a very prominent politician in Connecticut. And he wasn't a philosophical dreamer like Thomas Jefferson. He wasn't fiery like John Adams or Patrick Henry. But when Sherman spoke, everyone listened. His deep faith, his unwavering logic, his profound humility were his calling cards. He was respected by everyone. And he was the kind of man that you trusted implicitly. How many politicians can you say that of today? How many politicians do you truly trust? And as the tensions between the American colonies and Great Britain escalated, Roger Sherman didn't hesitate to throw his quiet but formidable weight behind the cause of independence, behind the cause of liberty. He was an early and vocal opponent of British overreach, particularly despising the idea of the Stamp Act, which he saw as a clear violation of colonial rights and sovereignty. And his commitment wasn't just in words. In 1774, Roger Sherman would play a crucial role in drafting the Continental Association. This wasn't just a petition. It was a bold, unified economic resistance to British authority. And he called for boycotts against British goods. It was a tangible act of defiance, demonstrating that the colonies are going to be free. He had resolve. And 2 years later, in the summer of 1776, Roger Sherman found himself in Philadelphia as a delegate to the Continental Congress. He was part of a distinguished committee of 5 tasked with drafting the Declaration of Independence. And he wasn't the primary author. Obviously, that went to Thomas Jefferson. He didn't play as large a role as Benjamin Franklin or John Adams, but his steady hand and his clear vision helped refine the document that would declare America as an independent nation. His signature on that declaration, it was less flamboyant than John Hancock's, that's for sure, but it was no less significant. And when we understand why he signed this document, it represented not ego, but a profound and deeply held belief in self-governance. Sherman wasn't a man of many words, but when it came to the fundamental principles of liberty, his commitment was absolute, and his impact on the United States is permanent. Just like last week's episode, when I focused on Charles Carroll, Sherman risked everything by signing the Declaration. His property, his freedom, even his life. But he didn't hesitate to pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. This wasn't just rhetoric for him. Sherman understood the price of liberty, and he was willing to pay that price. And beyond the grand declarations, beyond the political maneuvers, Roger Sherman was a man driven by a profound sense of moral courage, a deep commitment to individual liberty, especially the liberty of conscience. Long before the First Amendment was etched into our national fabric, Sherman was championing the idea of freedom, religious freedom, freedom of speech. And these are the things that our schools don't teach, but they should, because maybe, just maybe, Americans would have a better appreciation of where the United States came from and what it's become. In Connecticut, Roger Sherman authored an act for securing the rights of conscience in matters of religion. This was a landmark piece of legislation that protected the right of individuals to worship or not worship. But the key part was that they get to do it on their own beliefs, free from government interference. For Sherman, true freedom wasn't just political independence. It was the freedom of the mind and the spirit. We don't see much of that anymore. Things have changed dramatically, not just here, but even if you look at the liberal democracies of Europe, where what you say could get you hauled into court, arrested, and thrown in prison. That's the amazing part of Sherman. His morality wasn't just confined to religious liberty. It was all aspects of freedom. It also informed his quiet but firm opposition to slavery. While he understood the political complexities of the issue in his time, his personal convictions leaned strongly towards its abolition, and he believed the government's fundamental duty was to protect natural rights, not to redefine them, not to diminish them. The first duty of government is to preserve innocent life, not destroy it. He saw a limited but just government as the only legitimate form, one that served the people and upheld their inherent freedoms. This wasn't just political philosophy for Sherman. It was his deeply held conviction rooted in his faith and his understanding of human dignity. And when we get back from a quick break, Roger Sherman is going to play a pivotal role that's going to change everything. It's going to ensure that the American experiment doesn't die before it really gets a chance to begin. And if you ask many students today about our founding, most are clueless to how our first form of government collapsed under the Articles of Confederation, how we almost lost everything. What was won in blood during the Revolution was almost lost through incompetence. By the mid-1780s, the Articles of Confederation essentially collapsed. The country was on the brink. And there were four essential flaws that existed within the Articles of Confederation. Congress could request taxes, but it couldn't collect them. So the government was broke. Congress could pass laws, but it couldn't enforce them. Well, a country can't survive if everyone and all the states get to pick and choose the laws they want to enforce, the laws they want to uphold. Sound familiar today? Congress couldn't expand their power when necessary, but most importantly, Congress couldn't regulate interstate commerce, and states were at each other's throats. Because the founders recognized that the Articles of Confederation collapsed, that essentially the central government was rudderless. It had no power. In September of 1786, we held the Annapolis Convention, and the problem with the Annapolis Convention was that only 5 states sent representatives: New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, and Virginia. This was a catastrophic disaster. Our country is about to fall. And many of the other states didn't participate because they were skeptical regarding the legitimacy and purpose of this convention. Massachusetts didn't send delegates because it was dealing with Shays' Rebellion. And then there was the threat of war. States were so distrustful of each other that a number of them genuinely believed, they feared that the American experiment was already dead, that war between the states was a real concern, and states felt that they had to prepare to defend their own interests with force if necessary. Think about it. It's not like the British just left the United States, wished us the best of luck. They felt that, all right, we may have won the revolution, but they can't possibly create a government. They're not sophisticated, smart enough to be able to create a government that actually works. However, the founders decided that they were going to hold another convention. And this time, it's going to be in Philadelphia. Alexander Hamilton's going to draft a report calling for this broader convention. And the main basis of the report is that it's going to fix trade and save the Union. He argued that the convention is not going to be designed to write a new constitution, which is exactly what it became, but to try and resolve the Articles of Confederation through revisions. However, the Articles of Confederation was beyond repair. In order to change it, all 13 states would have to be on board. They would have to be in agreement to amend the Articles. And the Annapolis Convention showed that that wasn't possible. It wasn't going to happen. And it wasn't just Hamilton's report that's going to compel states to participate in the Philadelphia Convention. You had the Confederation Congress, which is going to endorse this convention and give it some legitimacy. James Madison is going to plead that the revolution would be in vain if the Union fell apart. And it's going to make the states vulnerable to civil war and outside European powers, France, England, Spain. But what really sealed the deal, where states are going to participate in this Philadelphia Convention, is when George Washington agreed to attend. That changed everything because he was the most trusted figure in the country at the time. And ultimately, 12 out of 13 states are going to participate in this convention of states. The only state that didn't was Rhode Island. In any event, when we go to the Philadelphia Convention, it begins in March of 1787, and the country and the convention itself are teetering on the brink of collapse. The states were deeply divided, particularly the large and small states. There were all types of debates occurring concerning representation, leadership, elections, slavery, and so much more. And the debates got heated. And it was a tense time, sweltering summer. They didn't have air conditioning. But this is what makes the Founding Fathers so remarkable. You look at a lot of the issues our current Congress deals with. You look at the debates we have. Founders had to save a nation, and they were able to figure it out. Today, many members of Congress, they're politicians. And so they don't know how to figure things out. So when we look at this Constitutional Convention, hot summer days, people are irritated, and several states are threatening to walk away. There were some states that wanted representation based on population. Others wanted equal representation. The deadlocks threatened to derail the entire convention, and the air in that Pennsylvania State House was thick with frustration and uncertainty. But into this contentious arena stepped Roger Sherman, quietly and very logically. He understood that neither side is going to fully prevail, and that without compromise, the fledgling nation would likely fracture. The American experiment is over. So he and Oliver Ellsworth, they proposed the Connecticut Plan. Some call it the Connecticut Compromise. Many know it today as the Great Compromise. See, Sherman's solution was elegant in its simplicity, and it was brilliant in its effectiveness. A bicameral legislature where you're going to have the People's House, the House of Representatives, and they're going to be there to represent the people. Representation is going to be based on population, and this would satisfy many of the large states. But we're also going to create a United States Senate. The United States Senate would grant each state equal representation. This is going to appease the small states. See, we've forgotten that. We think that the will of the people should always prevail in the United States because that's what people have been indoctrinated with in the education system. But the fact of the matter is, the House of Representatives represents what's in the best interest of the people. The Senate represents, or is supposed to represent, what's in the best interest of the state. And those two don't always align. Roger Sherman's plan wasn't flashy. It didn't win him accolades or dramatic speeches. But this compromise, born from Sherman's quiet wisdom and his pragmatic approach, became the very backbone of our republic. Without it, the American experiment in self-governance was over. See, Roger Sherman's commitment to building a functional and just government extended throughout the Constitutional Convention and the Great Compromise. He was a rare figure who signed both the Articles of Confederation on nation's first, albeit flawed, governing document, and then played the pivotal role in constructing something that was far stronger. And the Constitutional Convention was a difficult endeavor. Prior to the Philadelphia Convention, the Founding Fathers warned about a strong and powerful central government. The Founding Fathers had their concerns. Well, now at this convention, we got to figure out How do we strengthen the power of the central government? How do we strengthen the relationship between the state governments and the central government? And at the same time, how do we protect this idea of liberty? That's not an easy task, but Roger Sherman's consistency was remarkable, and he was always seeking unity, justice, and order for the young nation. During the convention, Sherman's also going to engage in one of the most morally fraught debates, the idea of slavery. The 3/5 compromise, where black people are only going to be counted as 3/5 of a person when it came to representation. The South wanted slaves counted as a full person, but the northern states opposed that. They said, that's ridiculous. It's going to give the South more representation in the government, which means the South will have more power within the government. They're going to have this idea of people being counted as a full person despite being unable to vote or participate in society in any real way. And Roger Sherman's objections to slavery were clear and principled. Either count them and free them, or don't count them at all. He argued against the practice of slavery, not on mere procedural grounds, but on moral ones, asserting that slavery was an abomination. It was an affront to the ideals of liberty that the new nation purported to uphold. So his stance, while not leading to the immediate abolition of slavery, it showcased his consistent moral compass. And ultimately, given the deadlock in the Philadelphia Convention, Sherman would go on to vote to support the 3/5 compromise. He understood that in order to keep the Union whole, 9 out of 13 states are going to have to support this new United States Constitution. And given that Rhode Island's not participating, it was really 9 out of 12 states. So if the southern states walked, if they backed off, it was game over. However, Sherman was always uncomfortable with slavery being legitimized in the United States Constitution. And he said, quote, I cannot reconcile my mind to the insertion of slavery as a part of the Constitution. Again, he supported the 3/5 compromise as a way to get the Constitution over the finish line. But after the Constitution's ratification, Sherman continued his dedicated service to the nation. He served in the newly formed House of Representatives. He would later go on to the United States Senate, representing Connecticut. And he always worked to implement the principles he helped enshrine in the Constitution, principles of liberty and freedom. He was a true statesman that was driven by principle rather than personal gain. He consistently sought to strengthen the Union, but more importantly, protect the liberties of its citizens. So Roger Sherman's name might not be as instantly recognizable as George Washington or Thomas Jefferson or Benjamin Franklin. And he was certainly overshadowed by the more dramatic and outspoken figures of the era. Yet, as we've seen, we've lived his contributions, and they were absolutely essential to the Republic's birth and the stability of the United States. He was, in many ways, the quintessential founding workhorse, a man who never saw glory or personal fanfare, but instead focused on achieving concrete results. And his model of compromise, his unwavering humility, his deep faith in liberty, and his commitment to rational discourse continue to endure today. He wasn't the orator that stirred passions, but the quiet, steady hand that guided the ship through treacherous waters. And the Philadelphia Convention, as we know it today, is the Constitutional Convention. He didn't care about statues, grand monuments, or anything like that. His most enduring legacy is literally written into every line of the system of government he helped create. He showed that true leadership resides not in the loudest voices, but in the wisest of counsels. Again, think about what's going on today. As we face challenges in our own republic, we would do well to remember Roger Sherman, not just for what he built, but how he built it, with strength, unwavering principle, and the extraordinary capacity to compromise for the right reasons. His story reminds us that the foundations of our freedom were laid by individuals, many of them unsung heroes that most Americans never even heard of. People who dedicated their life to the common good that transcended their personal ambitions. And that's why I encourage you to share this incredible story with others. Roger Sherman's life was a testament to virtue, reasoned faith, and a belief that liberty must be guarded with wisdom and courage. So let's remember the man who signed everything, who shaped everything, yet never demanded recognition and didn't receive the recognition he most certainly deserves. Now, if you found the content of this episode informative, please share it with your family and friends. Take 30 seconds to go to any podcast platform, write a good review, leave a 5-star rating, particularly on Apple Podcasts. I want to thank you for joining me, and I'll be back next week with another great episode of the P.A.S. Report podcast.
Thank you for listening to the P.A.S. Report. Don't forget to rate, share, and hit that subscribe button. That way you'll never miss an episode. For more exclusive content and updates, visit us at PASreport.com and follow Professor Giordano on all social media platforms at P.A.S. Report.